The 2-week wait is brutal. If you don't know what it is, welcome. Let me tell you, it is that time of waiting between trying, whether it is timing, trying an intrauterine insemination, an embryo transfer, that time until you can know for sure if you're pregnant or not. It's called the 2-week wait because it's based on a 28-day cycle. If you ovulate on day 14, 2 weeks later, you should know if you're pregnant or not. It's a little bit different, but it's just in the fertility community. It's called the 2-week wait, and it is brutal. Today, we're going to go over survival tips for surviving that waiting, that hurry up and waiting. We're going to go through survival tips, and you're going to learn so much. Stick around. I'm Dr. Lora Shahine. I'm a double board certified OBGYN and reproductive endocrinologist, helping people get through that 2-week wait for over 20 years. Welcome to the Baby or Bust Fertility podcast. This is your first time. Welcome. You're going to learn so much today. If you're coming back, I'm so happy that you're back. Please share this episode, this valuable episode, with friends that you know that need it. Now, let's get started talking about survival tips for the 2-week wait. The 2-week wait is that time period between the potential of being pregnant and knowing for sure. So whether it's around ovulation and timed intercourse, whether it's an intrauterine insemination or an embryo transfer, it takes time to know whether you're pregnant or not, because the embryo has to implant and start to make this pregnancy hormone called beta-HCG, which we can pick up on with a blood test or a home pregnancy test with urine. And it's just so hard to wait. Why is it tough? It's tough because the whole process of trying to conceive feels like hurry up and wait. Hurry up and make sure you're ovulating in time intercourse, or wait to start your stimulation medications for your egg retrieval. And then you got to make sure that there's an embryo to transfer. And then you work so hard to get to this goal and these hurdles. But even then, you still have to wait, whether it's 10 days after an embryo transfer, whether it's 14 days after an IUI, that waiting period is really tough. And there's a lot of mental gymnastics that happens during this time. It is common to worry. It's common to worry about doing activities, eating things that might impact your chances of success. You can feel worried about spotting. You think to yourself, like, is that implantation bleeding? Or is that the first sign of my period? You can feel twinges in your pelvic area. And you can think to yourself, oh, is that the first sign that, my embryo just accepted the embryo, or is it just gas? So that waiting can be so difficult. And I'm not only speaking as a fertility specialist, I'm speaking as an infertility warrior myself. Everybody's journey is different, but I did actually struggle to build my own family. And I have spent many 2-week wait periods in that mental gymnastics. And I want to talk to you about some do's and don'ts and some tips to help you get through until you know for sure and continue your journey. So what should we not do during the 2-week wait? There are 3 things that I really recommend not doing during the 2-week wait. Number 1, don't Google. It is okay. I understand as a person and as a doctor, patients that do this, we are so nervous about the outcome. We're so anxious to know what's going on that we're going to Google signs of early pregnancy or spotting in the 2-week wait. How do I know if it's implantation bleeding? Implantation bleeding, by the way, is just some spotting that happens in that 2-week wait. And it could be the embryo trying to implant. There is no way to prove that for sure. But if you have spotting in that 2-week wait and then you find out that you are pregnant, people will look back and say, oh, well, that must have been implantation bleeding. Dr. Google is full of clickbait, quite honestly. When you see a title that says, like, this is how to know for sure whether you're pregnant or not before the pregnancy test, red flag. You just have to honestly kind of wait. It's okay to Google. I mean, I know that I'm guilty of it too when I'm trying to figure things out, but if you could possibly not do it, I think it will be much more beneficial to do other things during the 2-week wait, because it can just drive you crazy. Number two, don't test early. I know that people do this, but it really can be confusing and your emotions are already on a huge roller coaster ride, and early tests can be wrong, whether positive or negative. And so my humble recommendation, even though we are all human, is to wait until the test can be definitive, positive or negative. It'll decrease your stress, even though I know we all do it. Number three, don't live dramatically differently based on where you are in your menstrual cycle. Let me explain. There are lots of times where people will, before ovulation or before the treatment, like an IUI or an embryo transfer, people will eat differently, they'll exercise differently, et cetera. And then as soon as there's the potential of being pregnant, they will dramatically change what they're eating, how much they exercise, what they're doing. And I understand this logic. This process feels so out of control. And so we feel like if we can take back some control, like we're actively doing something different to improve the chances that it'll work, then it feels good. It feels like, okay, I'm doing something. The downside of this is you don't know how long it's going to take to get to that positive pregnancy test or that family that you're trying to build on. And the more we fall into this sort of spiral of eliminating things that often give us joy, it can start to really take its toll emotionally on us. Let me give you an example. Exercise. Very common for my patients to exercise like crazy before ovulation or before a treatment like an IUI or an embryo transfer. And then after, when there's a potential of being pregnant, to do nothing. And I really recommend against this. I don't think it's the right thing to do to have such up and down activity levels. Moving your body is healthy. It helps you sleep. It decreases stress. And so instead of having drastically different exercise routines based on whether there's a potential for pregnancy or not, find an activity that you can be consistent and that you enjoy. Talk to your doctor about activity levels and what's right for you. But I really do recommend against trying to dramatically change your exercise routine or other things based on whether or not you're pregnant. When I'm talking to my patients about activity level around an embryo transfer or with the potential of being pregnant, I remind people of two things. Number one, Serena Williams won the Australian Open, I think in 2017, 8 weeks pregnant. I don't think she slowed down on her, exercise routine beforehand. Now she is an amazing athlete and that was right for her. But I'm just like, hey, look at how active this person is. And she was pregnant and had a, beautiful baby. Number two, in the 2-week wait, after an embryo transfer and after an IUI, it's so precious and people want to do everything right. It takes such an amount of courage and planning and work to get to this potential, and this waiting period is really intense. But I remind people that when people get pregnant naturally, while they're in the 2-week wait, they're often not changing their activity levels. And it's in that 2-week wait, you don't know if you're pregnant or not. And people get pregnant all the time without necessarily changing their activity levels. So it's very personal. Talk to your doctor, but those are kind of two things that I think about to try to ease people's worries. So again, don't Google, don't test early, and don't dramatically change your lifestyle before and after the potential of being pregnant in that 2-week wait. It's okay to have these feelings. It's okay to have these worries. It's okay to do these things. But I just want to caution you, when you're starting to Google and you start to feel anxious, turn it off. When you are really missing things that you enjoy and you took it away just because you're in the 2-week wait, if you talk to your doctor and it really seems like it's okay to do for you, then let yourself have that joy and just really try to avoid this kind of roller coaster ride of ups and downs and dramatically changing your lifestyle based on this, because I just want to take care of you and you need to take care of you. We're going to get back to talking about survival tips for the 2-week wait, but I want to remind you just how important it is to support the show. Wherever you are listening, follow the show so you get our weekly episodes all about reproductive health. If you are finding these tips that we're talking about today valuable, share this episode with a friend that you know that it could help. Just getting that word out is so helpful. And reviews are incredibly helpful. We just got this review on Apple Podcasts, and I just wanted to share it with you. Insightful, made for the fertility community. That's the title. It says, a great mix of education on fertility facts mixed with emotional support. I feel like Dr. Shahine really gets it and appreciate her compassion when she discusses topics and shares her own perspective. That is such a kind review. Thank you so much. So anywhere you're listening, 5-star review, tell us why you think it's valuable, if at all possible. It just means so much. Now let's get back to learning more tips for surviving the 2-week wait. So we've talked about what not to do during the 2-week wait. What should you do during the 2-week wait? I think about distraction, I think about self-care, and I think about having a plan. So distractions. I reached out to my wonderful community on Instagram and asked, what do you recommend during the 2-week wait? And I was so amazed at a lot of the wonderful suggestions. A lot of them were about distraction. And some of the great responses that I got and I loved are, if you're type A like me, I got a lot of organization, kind of make a checklist and a bucket list of projects that you want to do around the house and kind of get them done during the 2-week wait to distract you. I also love the suggestions with, reading a new book, starting a new TV series, kind of distracting yourself with something you've been wanting to do for a while. I loved some of the ideas of reconnecting with a partner if you happen to have one. Think about some date nights, unique ideas like go to a new museum that you haven't been to before, gardening. Try new recipes, anything that you have been putting on hold or wanting to try, pick up a new hobby, try knitting, all these different things that you might want to enjoy and explore. It might be a really great way to distract yourself while you're waiting. Number 2, self-care. This is such an important time to be kind to yourself. So if you're in therapy, schedule an extra session during the 2-week wait. If you're journaling, make sure that you set aside time during your day to do that. Practice gratitude, mindfulness. Don't forget meditation if that's a part of your routine. Set aside time to relax, go for walks, connect with friends. But most of all, just be really kind to yourself and set aside time to reward yourself, to do something you enjoy, and realize that a lot of feelings are going to come up during this 2-week wait. When you're trying to conceive, and especially when you're doing fertility treatment, you can be distracted by appointments at the clinic or remembering to take your medication. And then after you have the embryo transfer or the intrauterine insemination, you can kind of feel a little bit empty. Maybe you're doing progesterone, maybe you're doing something like that, but it's just not as busy. And so you have mental space to worry. And you could have symptoms in your body like spotting or twinges and be nervous. And so realize that it's going to be an emotional time. You might be more sensitive to baby announcements and seeing a pregnant woman in the grocery store. If you get triggered by this, just be kind to yourself and say, yeah, I'm in the 2-week wait. And think about like, this is a negative feeling. It's a negative thought, but I'm going to have it and I'm going to let it go. Try breathing techniques. Try to write down in your journal if you're having emotions. Sometimes just writing can kind of let that thought go. But just be kind to yourself and take really good care of yourself. It's one of the most important things that you can do along this whole journey. And number 3, consider having a plan, a next step plan for what if. It's very wonderful and fantastic to plan for when it's a positive pregnancy test, because that is the ultimate goal. But if you have a negative pregnancy test, you start your period, consider having a plan before that day so that if it happens, you kind of are not in the middle of grief and trying to figure out what that next step is. So whether it's talking to the clinic that you're working with, like, hey, if we have a negative pregnancy test, what do you think is next? Whether it's scheduling a return visit with your doctor, regardless of the outcome, so that you know you have that time set aside to ask your questions. Whether it's knowing that you're going to take a break, for a cycle and maybe not do the ovulation predictor kits next cycle and just sort of see what happens. It's really nice to consider having a plan for what if, whether it is the news that you're waiting for or whether it is the news that you don't want. That 2-week wait is really tough. I cannot overemphasize the mental gymnastics that happen during that time and the importance of taking good care of yourself. So think of distractions, think of people that you want to spend time with, realize that you're going to have negative feelings mixed with lots of different emotions, and most important, take care of you. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you found something valuable that can truly help you through this very tough time. You can find this episode and all others at my website, drlorashahine.com. You can get lots of educational content there too. You can get links to other podcast episodes, my blog. You can get links to my weekly newsletter where you stay in touch, learn about fertility in the news, and educational content for that week. Really appreciate your being here. Thank you to my team at Audiotocracy for producing the show. I'm your host, Dr. Lora Shahine, and until next week, wishing you love, luck, and pineapples.